Ryan, a young and handsome man in his late 20s, had recently moved to a small, quiet town. He was looking for a fresh start and found an old, charming house at the edge of a dense forest. The house was big, with creaky wooden floors and high ceilings, but its eerie silence often made him uneasy. Locals warned him about the place, saying it had a dark history, but Ryan shrugged off their superstitions. He believed in logic, not ghost stories. One chilly evening, as Ryan was unpacking boxes in the living room, he noticed something strange. The air in the room suddenly turned cold, so cold that his breath became visible. He checked the windows, they were all shut tight. Confused, he turned on the heater, but the unsettling chill remained. Later that night, Ryan was reading a book when he heard it, a soft, sorrowful sob coming from upstairs. At first, he thought it was his imagination. He turned off the music playing in the background and listened carefully. The sobbing grew louder, more desperate. His heart began to race. Grabbing a flashlight, he cautiously climbed the old wooden staircase, each step creaking beneath his feet. The sound led him to a narrow hallway where the light bulbs flickered weakly. At the end of the corridor, he saw her. A shadowy figure stood motionless, a woman dressed in a tattered white gown. Her hair hung messily over her pale face, and her glowing, hollow eyes stared straight at him. Ryan froze in place, his throat dry and his hands trembling. "Leave this house," the woman whispered, her voice cold and distant. Ryan's fear was momentarily replaced by curiosity. "Who are you? What do you want?" he managed to ask, his voice barely audible. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she raised her arm and pointed at him. The walls around him began to creak, and a powerful gust of wind blew through the hallway, extinguishing his flashlight. Ryan stumbled backward, falling to the floor. When he regained his composure, the spirit was gone. That night, sleep eluded Ryan. He couldn't stop thinking about her glowing eyes and chilling words. Was she real? Was she a figment of his imagination? Despite the fear gnawing at him, a strange sense of intrigue began to grow within him. He decided one thing: he wasn't leaving. The next night, Ryan tried to convince himself that the strange encounter was just his imagination. He focused on fixing the broken furniture and organizing his belongings, but the uneasy feeling in the house never left. As the clock struck midnight, Ryan heard faint footsteps in the hallway. They were slow, deliberate, and growing louder. He froze, gripping the edge of the table. "It's just the old house," he muttered to himself, trying to ignore the fear creeping up his spine. But then he saw her again. At the end of the hallway stood the same woman in white. Her head was slightly tilted, her glowing eyes fixed on him. The air turned icy, and Ryan could feel his heart pounding in his chest. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice echoing eerily. Instead of running, Ryan took a step closer. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice trembling. The spirit didn't answer. Her figure flickered like a flame about to go out, and then she vanished. Ryan's fear quickly turned into determination. He refused to be driven out of his own house. He spent the next day researching the property's history. In the town's library, he found an old newspaper article. It told the story of Eleanor, a young woman who lived in the house over a century ago. She was betrayed by her lover and died under mysterious circumstances. Some said she had been murdered, others believed she took her own life. Ryan couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Is she still waiting for him? He thought aloud. That night, the hauntings grew worse. Doors slammed shut on their own, and the sound of sobbing echoed through the house. Ryan found messages scratched into the walls, words like, "Go back," and, "You'll regret this." Asterisk. But despite the escalating terror, Ryan couldn't shake the strange fascination he felt toward Eleanor. She wasn't just a ghost, she was a mystery waiting to be solved. He made a decision: he would not run. If Eleanor wanted him to leave, she would have to confront him directly. Ryan's fascination with Eleanor deepened. He couldn't focus on anything else. During the day, he would scour old records and talk to the locals, trying to piece together her tragic story. At night, he would sit in the dimly lit living room, waiting for her to appear. His obsession began to blur the line between fear and curiosity. He wanted answers: why was she haunting the house? Why was she warning him to leave? But more than anything, he wanted to help her. One evening, Ryan decided to call out to her. He lit candles around the room and sat on the floor, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Eleanor," he said softly, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "If you're here, show yourself. I'm not afraid of you." The temperature in the room plummeted, and the flames wavered as if caught in a gust of wind. Suddenly, the sobbing began again, soft at first, then louder, as though it was coming from all directions. And then she appeared. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of sorrow and anger. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Why do you keep calling me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You don't understand the danger you're in." Ryan took a deep breath. "I don't want to hurt you. I just want to know your story. Maybe I can help you." Eleanor's expression softened, but only for a moment. "Help me. No one can help me. Leave this house before it's too late." Ryan stood his ground. "I'm not going anywhere. You don't scare me." The room shook violently, and the candles were snuffed out, plunging him into darkness. Ryan heard her voice, faint but clear, "You'll regret this." When the lights flickered back on, she was gone. Ryan sat in silence, his heart racing. He didn't know if he had made progress or provoked her further. But one thing was certain, he couldn't stop now. Eleanor wasn't just a spirit haunting his house, she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. No matter the cost, he would uncover the truth about her. Ryan's determination grew stronger with each passing day, but so did Eleanor's warnings. She began appearing more frequently, her presence overwhelming and unpredictable. Some nights, she would stand at the foot of his bed, her glowing eyes watching him silently. Other nights, she would whisper his name from the shadows, her voice filled with sorrow. Ryan felt trapped between fear and obsession. Every time he saw her, he felt a strange connection, as if there was more to her story than just vengeance or pain. He couldn't bring himself to leave. One night, as he was reviewing old photos of the house, he heard her voice again, louder this time. "Why are you still here?" she demanded, her figure materializing in the corner of the room. She looked more human now, her anger replaced by a look of despair. "I need to know the truth," Ryan said, standing up to face her. "What happened to you, Eleanor? Why can't you move on?" Eleanor stepped closer, her form flickering like a dying flame. "You think you can save me?" she said bitterly. "You don't understand what you're inviting into your life." Ryan clenched his fists. "Then help me understand. Show me what happened to you." For a moment, Eleanor hesitated. Her gaze softened, and the room filled with a heavy silence. Then, without warning, she raised her hand, and Ryan's vision blurred. Suddenly, he was no longer in his living room. He was standing in a dimly lit version of the house, but everything looked old and decayed. He saw Eleanor, alive and smiling, dancing with a man in the very same room. Her laughter echoed, filling the air with joy. But the scene quickly shifted. The man was now shouting at her, his face twisted in anger. Ryan watched in horror as Eleanor cried, her hands trembling as she begged the man to stay. But he walked away, slamming the door behind him. Moments later, Eleanor's lifeless body was lying on the floor, her eyes wide open, filled with heartbreak. Ryan gasped and found himself back in the present. Eleanor stood before him, tears streaming down her pale face. "Now you see," she whispered. "This house is my prison, and your presence only makes it worse." Ryan's heart ached for her, but he refused to give up. "Then let me free you," he said softly. Eleanor's face darkened. "If you stay, you'll regret it. Some things are meant to remain buried." And with that, she vanished once again, leaving Ryan alone with the weight of what he had seen. Ryan could no longer distinguish fear from determination. Eleanor's tragic past haunted his mind, but instead of scaring him away, it only deepened his resolve. He was determined to free her from the torment that bound her to the house. That night, Ryan prepared himself. He placed candles in a circle on the floor, holding a notebook filled with everything he had learned about Eleanor. He had read about rituals that could help spirits find peace, but he wasn't sure if they would work, or if Eleanor would even let him try. As midnight struck, the room grew cold, and the candles flickered violently. Ryan felt her presence before he saw her. She materialized before him, her form more solid than ever before. Her pale face looked tired, her eyes filled with both sorrow and anger. "I warned you," she said, her voice echoing like a distant cry. "Why can't you leave me alone?" Ryan stepped forward, his fear replaced by determination. "Because I care," he said firmly. "You don't deserve to be trapped here. I can help you, Eleanor." Eleanor's expression shifted, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You're a fool," she hissed. "Do you think you're stronger than the curse that binds me here? You'll only doom yourself." Ryan ignored her words. "I know what happened to you. You were betrayed and abandoned. But you don't have to stay here, clinging to that pain. Let me help you move on." Eleanor's figure wavered, her anger giving way to something softer, fear. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "It's not just me. If I leave, the darkness I've kept at bay will consume this place. You can't save me without destroying yourself." Ryan hesitated, but only for a moment. "Then let it come. I won't stop until you're free." Eleanor stared at him, her glowing eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. "You're brave," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But bravery won't save you." Before Ryan could respond, the room shook violently. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting and writhing like living things. A deep, guttural growl echoed through the house, and Eleanor's figure began to fade. "Ryan, you've unleashed something far worse than me," she said, her voice breaking. "Now it's coming for both of us." And with that, she disappeared, leaving Ryan alone in the flickering candlelight. For the first time, he felt true fear. Whatever darkness Eleanor had warned him about was no longer contained, and it was coming for him.